We were ordered to undress. Anna Weber stood in that cold Massachusetts room, 26 years old, a nurse from Bremen who had survived 4 years of total war. The American guard's voice was calm, almost gentle, and that was what made it terrifying. She expected monsters. She had been promised monsters. Soldiers who laughed while burning prisoners alive, men without souls or mercy. But what walked through that door would shatter everything she had been taught to believe about America and about herself. September 15th, 1945. The war in Europe had been over for 4 months, but for the 47 women stepping off transport trucks at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, the war still lived in every heartbeat, every breath, every terror-filled moment. The compound stretched before them like a small, orderly village. Whitewashed barracks, trimmed grass, guard towers flying the American flag. Beyond the barbed wire fence, they could see a water tower and distant Massachusetts hills already touched with autumn color. There were no gallows, no cages, no sounds of screaming, only the rhythmic hum of generators and the faint music of a radio from the guardhouse. Anna Weber, 26, a surgical nurse who had worked in field hospitals from Normandy to the Rhineland. Her hands had held men together while they died. Her hands had amputated limbs with handsaws when morphine ran out. Her hands now trembled as she clutched the rough wool of her uniform tunic. Maria Russo, 19, an Italian clerk from Milan whose fingertips still bore ink stains from typing German supply orders. She had never fired a weapon, never treated a wound, never done anything more violent than stamp requisition forms. But she wore the uniform of the defeated, and that made her guilty of everything. Elizabeth Hoffman, 34, a schoolteacher from Hamburg who had lost her husband at Stalingrad and had not seen her 7-year-old son in 18 months. Her face was the color of old paper. Her eyes were elsewhere, always elsewhere, seeing things that no longer existed. 3 women, 3 nations that had sworn allegiance to fascism, 3 enemies of America. And in the hours to come, they would discover something far more dangerous than cruelty. They would discover mercy. The command came through an interpreter, a young Japanese-American private named Henry Tanaka. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. Please remove your uniforms. You will be issued new clothing. Anna felt her stomach drop. This is it, she thought. This is where it happens. She had heard the rumors, whispered stories about shower rooms that were not shower rooms, about women taken humiliated, disappeared. Slowly, mechanically, the women undressed. Some prayed in whispered German and Italian. Others simply stared straight ahead, faces blank, preparing for whatever came next. The fabric, stiff from salt and sweat, clung to their skin. Boots thudded softly on the wooden floor. When the door opened, Anna braced for soldiers, for cameras, for the leering faces of men ready to extract payment for 4 years of war. Instead, she saw women, American nurses, professional, calm, carrying medical charts and clipboards. For a moment, confusion replaced fear. The nurses did not shout. They did not leer. They spoke softly, professionally, like people accustomed to caring for others. You will be examined for injuries and illness, the translator said. Then you will be issued clean garments. It sounded absurd. Clean garments for prisoners. Anna felt heat rise to her face as she realized one of the American nurses was looking directly at her. Not with disgust, but with something far worse. Empathy. They were led into another room. Tile floors, metal shower heads lining the walls. Steam already coiling from the pipes. The air was warm, actually warm, not the damp cold of European autumn, but heated, controlled, intentional warmth. The women hesitated at the doorway, instinctively clutching their discarded clothes to their chests, expecting humiliation. Anna froze. Her mind screamed one word: gas. This was how it would end. They would seal the doors, turn on the valves, and the Third Reich's final prophecy would come true. The Americans were savages, after all. The water hissed to life. The water fell. Not gas. Water. And not ice-cold punishment. Hot water. Clean, endless warm water that steamed against the cold tile. The first drop hit Anna's shoulder and she nearly cried out. She flinched, expecting pain. What she got instead was warmth. Human warmth. The kind of warmth that says you matter, you are worth this, you are still alive. Around her, the others froze, uncertain. Then one woman gasped. Another laughed, a strange, hysterical laugh that sounded like sobbing. Steam filled the room, blurring faces softening everything. For the first time in years, they felt clean. Dirt ran down the drains in gray streaks. The smell of soap filled their lungs. Not the caustic lye they had used in camps, but real lavender soap, the kind that smelled like peacetime, like mothers and gardens and Sunday mornings before the world caught fire. They scrubbed until their skin turned pink, until the mirror on the far wall began to fog over completely. Somewhere outside, an American soldier was humming a tune, unaware that every note seemed to echo the collapse of an entire belief system. They had been ordered to undress. They had expected violence. Instead, they were being washed of lies. When the showers ended, silence clung to the room heavier than steam. The women stood wrapped in thin white towels, their hair wet and clinging to their faces. No one spoke. The warmth of the washer still lingered on their skin, but inside cold suspicion returned. They had been taught that nothing the enemy did was without purpose. If they were being treated well, it could only mean something worse was waiting. The American nurse spoke softly through the translator. "You will be examined by a doctor. Please wait here." The word examine sent a jolt through the group. "They're going to use us for experiments," Maria whispered in Italian. "That's what they do." Another muttered, "They'll send photographs to the newspapers to show how they humiliate us." The older ones tried to steady their breathing, but fear had its own gravity. Every rumor from the last 5 years about Allied cruelty, about vengeance, about women who disappeared came rushing back. They filed into the examination room. The space was spotless. Metal tables, white sheets, bottles of antiseptic lined in perfect rows. A faint smell of alcohol hung in the air. The American doctor was young, younger than Anna. He looked like he should still be in medical school. His name tag read Dr. Richard Chen, Chinese-American, professional, methodical. Anna watched him work with clinical detachment. As a nurse, she recognized what was happening. This was standard medical protocol, Geneva Convention requirements. They were actually being cared for. Dr. Chen examined each woman with professional precision. Checked pulse, blood pressure, examined for wounds, infections, lice. He spoke softly through the interpreter. "Any pain, any injuries?" Anna shook her head mute. The nurse assisting him, a woman in her late 20s with sad eyes, murmured numbers as she wrote. Malnutrition, dehydration, scabies scars, vitamin deficiency. Patient 23, Anna W. 42 kilograms, height 165 centimeters. Severe malnutrition, possible tuberculosis exposure. And then that nurse looked up, made eye contact with Anna. And Anna saw something in those eyes that made her throat tighten. Empathy, not pity, not contempt. Empathy, as if this American nurse, this enemy, somehow understood what Anna had endured. That nurse's name was Dorothy Sullivan. She was 28 years old, and 3 months earlier, she had buried her brother killed by German bullets on Omaha Beach. But Anna did not know that yet. All she knew was that the woman who should have hated her did not. And that was more confusing than any cruelty could have been. After the examination, they were led to another building. The floorboards actually shone. Someone had polished them recently. Windows were open, letting in September air that smelled of pine and rain. On long wooden tables sat stacks of gray cotton dresses, clean undergarments, socks still warm from the laundry. Everything neatly folded, sized, organized. Anna picked up a dress. The fabric was soft, not the rough wool of her uniform, not the scratchy linen of hospital sheets, soft cotton that did not hurt to touch. She could not remember the last time she had held something new. In Germany, by 1945, everything was recycled, patched, reworn until it fell apart. New fabric was reserved for the military, and even then it was rationed to the point of absurdity. But here's what Anna did not understand yet, the detail that would haunt her for decades. These were not gifts. This was not charity. This was procedure. Everything she had experienced so far, the hot water, the medical exam, the clean clothes, all of it was mandated by the Geneva Convention, required by American military regulations. This was not kindness, it was protocol. And when Anna finally understood that, when she realized that America's mercy was not improvised generosity, but engineered system, it would change everything she believed about power. But that realization was still weeks away. Right now, dressed in clean gray cotton, warm socks on her feet, for the first time in months, Anna Weber was about to face the most dangerous weapon in America's arsenal: breakfast. The smell hit first. Coffee. Real coffee, thick and earthy, blending with the sweet edge of bread baking, and something richer underneath. Bacon. Eggs. Food that mattered. The room was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Long tables covered with white cloth. Actual tablecloths like a restaurant. Metal forks and spoons that caught the light. And at each place setting a plate that looked like it belonged to an officer. Not a prisoner, an officer. Oatmeal sprinkled with brown sugar. Scrambled eggs soft and yellow. Toast with butter. An orange half placed neatly beside the plate. Coffee black and steaming with a small pitcher of milk. Private Tanaka gestured to the tables. "Please," he said simply, "take a seat." Nobody moved. For a full 3 minutes, 47 women stood in that doorway staring at food they could not process, could not understand, could not trust. Anna's training kicked in. As a nurse, she had learned to assess situations clinically. The food looked real. The smell was real. "But why? Why feed prisoners like this?" Maria Russo whispered in Italian. "It's poisoned. It has to be." Elizabeth Hoffman murmured a prayer in German. The older women clutched their hands together, preparing for something, anything. "It's safe," Private Tanaka said. His voice was gentle, almost sad. "Eat." Maria moved first, 19 years old, hungry in a way that made thinking impossible. She sat, picked up her spoon with trembling hands, scooped one small bite of oatmeal. The brown sugar hit her tongue first, sweetness she had not tasted in 4 years. Then the warmth of the oatmeal, the texture, the abundance of it. Maria's face changed, first confusion, then shock. And then her eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks into the bowl of oatmeal. That broke the stillness. Like a dam cracking, the other women sat. Forks clinked against plates. Spoons scraped bowls. And the room filled with the sound of quiet sobbing. Anna tasted coffee for the first time in 3 years. It was bitter, strong, alive. The warmth spread through her chest, uncoiling something frozen inside her that she had not even known was there. She bit into toast. Butter melted on her tongue. Real butter, not the synthetic margarine Germany had been making since 1942. Her throat tightened. She could not swallow. Not because the food was wrong, but because it was right. An American cook, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a stained apron, passed by Anna's table. He noticed her tears, did not say anything, just gave a small nod and kept walking. That gesture, that simple wordless acknowledgement, it hit Anna harder than any speech, any propaganda, any promise. It said, "I see you, you are human, I know you are suffering." Halfway through the meal, an American officer entered. Captain Morrison, tall, weathered, war-tired. The translator called for attention. The officer waved it off. "Let them eat," he said. His voice was matter-of-fact, almost weary. "They've had enough orders for a lifetime." Then he left. Did not make a speech. Did not demand gratitude. Just left. Gave them privacy to eat, as if privacy was a right, not a privilege. When the plates were cleared, a second course arrived. Bread and chocolate. Real chocolate wrapped in silver foil stamped with a name none of them had seen in years. Hershey. The room went silent. Completely silent. Because chocolate had vanished from Europe by 1942. It was a memory from a world that no longer existed. A ghost from peacetime. Maria picked hers up, turned it slowly in her hands like an artifact from another planet, broke off one small square, let it melt on her tongue. The sweetness was almost unbearable. Not just the taste, the meaning of it. Someone somewhere in America had made this chocolate, packaged it, shipped it across an ocean, allocated it to enemy prisoners. While around the room, women held chocolate bars and wept. Not from fear anymore, from confusion, from the terrible crushing weight of realizing that everything they had been told about America, about the enemy, about the war, might have been a lie. Anna could not eat hers. She held it in her palm, staring at the embossed letters, the neat edges, the proof that such things still existed. Dorothy Sullivan walked past, paused and quietly placed a second bar beside Anna's plate. For later, she said softly. Anna did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. She nodded, unable to speak. That night back in the barracks, the chocolate remained uneaten beside her bed. Clean sheets. That was what Anna noticed first when she entered the barracks. Clean sheets. White. Crisp, smelling faintly of soap and sun. The bunks had actual mattresses. Not straw pallets, not wooden boards, but mattresses with springs that gave way under weight. Pillows. Blankets that were not crawling with lice. Anna sat on her bunk, still holding that chocolate bar. She had not eaten it yet. Could not. Because eating it would mean accepting it, and accepting it would mean acknowledging that the enemy was treating her better than her own government had. Down the aisle, Maria whispered to Elizabeth. Anna caught fragments. Fattening us up. They'll use us for something. Medical experiments, propaganda. The theories spread like fever. This is psychological warfare. They're softening us to extract information. They're going to parade us in front of cameras to show how generous America is. This kindness is a weapon. And here is the terrible truth. They were right. It was a weapon, just not the kind they feared. Anna lay awake long after the lights went out. The light in the corridor flickered softly, casting bars of shadow across the floor. She could hear a radio playing somewhere outside, a man's voice singing in English, low and slow. The melody sounded like sorrow disguised as joy. She turned over, pulling the blanket to her chin, and wondered why her heart was pounding, even though nothing had happened. Maybe that was the cruelest part of all. They had been prepared for pain, for hatred, for death, but not for kindness, not for the unbearable tension of waiting for violence that never came. By dawn, she realized something terrifying. Fear was no longer protecting her. It was consuming her. Morning came wrapped in fog. A bell rang somewhere outside, steady and calm. Not the metallic shriek of alarms they were used to, but something almost gentle, like the beginning of a workday. The women rose slowly, their bodies stiff from months of malnutrition, their minds still anchored in suspicion. They dressed in the gray cotton uniforms given the night before. Plain, practical, clean. The fabric smelled faintly of soap. It felt like wearing someone else's life. They were assembled in a courtyard lined with gravel paths and white-painted posts. The fog clung to the ground, making the camp seem suspended between worlds. American guards stood nearby, rifles slung casually across their shoulders, their faces impassive but not hostile. When the translator arrived, he gestured toward a long building at the edge of the compound. Breakfast, he said simply. The word landed awkwardly in the air. Breakfast. Real breakfast. No one moved at first. The last meal they had before capture had been hard biscuits and bitter coffee substitute. Food in captivity usually meant humiliation. Slop thrown into tin bowls, the faint taste of rust and resentment. But when the doors opened, a wave of warmth and scent poured out. The smell of coffee mingled with bread and bacon. It was overwhelming, almost offensive in its abundance. 3 weeks passed. Anna was assigned to the infirmary. Medical duties, organizing supplies, assisting with examinations, translating symptoms from German prisoners who could not speak English. The supply shelves were lined with boxes labeled in block letters. Medical supplies, sanitizer, cotton, gauze. Every object was identical, standardized, efficient. The nurses used them methodically, almost reverently, as if cleanliness itself were an act of faith. Every week, shipments arrived from the nearest depot. Trucks filled with crates of food, linens, soap, writing paper, medicine. It was not generosity, it was procedure. That made it even more powerful. Anna began to see the machinery. The system. America's mercy was not improvised. It was industrialized. The same engines that had built bombers and Liberty ships now produced beds, blankets, and rations for prisoners. The same bureaucracy that had coordinated invasions could coordinate comfort. It was mercy on a production line, planned, costed, accounted for. And that Anna realized was what made it terrifying. The Americans did not just believe in decency, they had engineered it. Week 5. Anna was assigned to exterior work detail. Inventoried at the quartermaster warehouse. First time outside the fence since arrival. What she saw stopped her cold. Warehouses stretching 100 yards. Stacked flour sacks taller than a man. Cases of tinned beef stamped with dates promising tomorrow would still exist. Drums of fuel lined up like soldiers at attention. Boxes upon boxes labeled P rations, 1945 medical supplies, clothing winter. This was not for Fort Devens. This was for the entire system. Every camp, every hospital, every unit. An endless mechanical river of supplies flowing from factories Anna could not even imagine. A sergeant counted with a carpenter's pencil. How many to the mess? How many to the hospital? How many to Camp B? 17. Mercy apportioned. Mercy delivered. Mercy with stock numbers and delivery schedules. Anna turned to Maria, whispered in German. They did not just decide to be kind, they engineered it. Maria sat on a crate stunned. Elizabeth touched a flour sack like it was sacred. Anna laughed a strange, broken laugh. We were told American weakness was their sentimentality, Anna said. But this is strength. They walked back to the compound in silence, passed by a quartermaster truck, U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps painted on the side. Even Mercy had a stock number. That night, the letters arrived. Canvas sack, clerks sorting envelopes, women's hands reaching for thin paper. Anna's letter was from her mother. The handwriting was shakier than Anna remembered. The paper so thin, it was almost transparent. My beloved Anna, we are alive. The roof leaks, but we patched it with tin. Your father's cough worsens at night. The queue for bread begins before dawn. We traded the last of your wedding linen, the linen your grandmother made, for potatoes. The coal ration will not last through winter. You would not recognize the street where you were born. It is almost a field now. I light candles for you, though the church is gone. With love, Mother. That evening, dinner was beef stew, thick, rich, with carrots that kept their shape in the spoon and meat that fell apart tender. Anna looked at her bowl. Her mother was trading linen for potatoes, and Anna was eating beef. Maria received a letter saying her sister had typhus. Elizabeth's letter mentioned her 7-year-old son, asking when Papa was coming home, not understanding that Papa was never coming home. One woman set her bowl aside, could not touch it, just stared at the wood grain of the table as if she could disappear into it. Anna realized something that night that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She was surviving, thriving even, gaining weight, getting healthy, while her mother starved, while her father coughed through cold nights without coal, while children in Bremen scraped for bread crusts in rubble-strewn streets. She was the enemy, and the enemy was feeding her better than her own people could. That night, Anna could not sleep. She rose, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and stood at the window. The guard walked his post, a metronome of boots and breath in the cold. In the distance, a generator throbbed with the patience of power. Beyond the wire, a truck's headlamps moved along the road. 2 coins of light buying passage through darkness without famine. Week 9. Night shift in the infirmary. Anna and Dorothy organizing medicine inventory in silence. 2 women on opposite sides of war, sorting bandages in fluorescent light. Anna broke first. Why are you doing this? Dorothy stopped, turned, surprised by the question. What do you mean this? All of it. The food, the medicine, the kindness. Your brother died. German bullets killed him. I wore a German uniform. Why don't you hate me? Dorothy sat down, heavy, like the question had physical weight. A long silence filled the space between them. I did hate, Dorothy said finally, her voice breaking slightly. When Tom died, I wanted every German to suffer. I volunteered for POW duty to hurt someone, to make someone feel what I felt. Anna watched, understanding. But then you arrived, Dorothy continued. And you were not monsters. You were just women, scared, starving. You look like my cousin. And I thought Tom would not want this. Tom would not want me to become hateful, because if I become what killed him, then he died for nothing. Anna felt tears fall, reached across the table, took Dorothy's hand. Their hands met. Former enemies, current humans. We were told you were savages, Anna whispered, that Americans had no culture, no honor, no... And now I eat your food and wear your clothes, and I don't know who I am anymore. Both women cried now, quietly. Release of years of hate and fear. Maybe that's the point, Dorothy said gently. Maybe you get to decide who you are now, not Hitler, not the propaganda. You, the words hung in the air between them like a fragile truth, too dangerous to touch but too important to ignore. Outside, the September night deepened into October cold. Inside Fort Devens, in a small infirmary lit by fluorescent tubes, 2 women from opposite sides of the deadliest war in human history held hands across a table, and discovered that the real weapon was not bullets or bombs. It was the terrifying possibility that your enemy might be right. Week 7 arrived with the first frost of October. The Massachusetts mornings turned sharp, the kind of cold that reminded the European prisoners of home. But home was not a comfort anymore. Home was a wound that refused to heal. An American nurse entered the barracks carrying a metal tray filled with small objects wrapped in brown paper. Personal items, the translator said. You may take one each. The women exchanged wary looks as they approached. Inside the paper, they found a wooden comb, a small hand towel, and astonishingly a mirror no larger than a postcard. For a moment, no one moved. The mirrors caught the morning light, scattering fragments of brightness across the room. Then one by one, the women lifted them. The sound that followed was not words, it was breath. Soft, startled, disbelieving. Anna raised her mirror slowly. The reflection that stared back at her was someone she barely recognized. Her face was clean, her skin no longer gray with dirt. Her hair, freshly washed, had color again, a dull gold catching the light. The dark circles beneath her eyes had softened. She looked younger, almost alive. For a second, she felt the reflex to smile, and that terrified her more than anything. Across the room, Maria stood frozen, her mirror trembling in her hand. I look like I did before the war, she whispered in Italian. The words felt forbidden. Another woman, older, touched her cheek as if testing whether the skin belonged to her. I had forgotten my face, she said quietly. I had forgotten I even had one. The room filled with murmurs, then with silence again. Thick, reflective, uneasy. The mirrors had done what no interrogation could have. They forced each woman to confront the evidence that she was still human. They looked at themselves and saw not prisoners, not soldiers, not enemies, but people who had survived. People the war had almost erased. Anna lowered the mirror to her lap. Her hands shook. She remembered the lectures, the propaganda reels, the slogans printed on factory walls. Suffering is strength. Sacrifice is purity. The Reich needs your devotion more than your life. She had believed them once. She had believed that dignity came from endurance. But this strange mercy felt like betrayal to everything she had been taught. She glanced toward the window. Outside, she could see an American flag moving in the breeze. Red, white, blue. Bright colors against a sky scrubbed clean of smoke. For years, she had seen that flag painted on the sides of bombers and tanks, a symbol of destruction. Now framed by sunlight and silence, it looked almost gentle. Dorothy entered the barracks making rounds. She paused when she saw the women with their mirrors. Her face softened in a way that suggested she understood something they did not yet. You are all safe here, Dorothy said through the translator. No one will harm you. You will be treated as prisoners, but also as women who have endured much. We hope you will recover. Recover. The word felt like an insult and a blessing all at once. Recover from what? From losing the war, from believing the wrong things, from surviving when so many had not. Maria spoke without thinking. Why? She asked the translator. Why are they doing this? The translator hesitated, then answered. Because they believe it is right. That answer unsettled them more than any threat could have. In the Reich, right and wrong had always been defined by command, orders, duty, hierarchy. Here right seemed to come from something invisible, something internal, something individual. That night, the women gathered in hushed clusters. Frida, who had once corrected grammar in a typing pool with a ruler's tap, said it was all a plan as intricate as any war map. They fatten us, she whispered, to parade us as proof of their virtue. We are being used. Her voice steadied as she spoke, pleased to find a logic that could carry the weight of hunger. A younger girl, barely 19 and new to the habits of certainty, answered without defiance. Then why no photographers? Why no newspapers? Silence met her, thin, but present. Someone else said the thing that had to be said. Our own people do not feed us. The words were not accusation, only fact, and yet they struck like blasphemy. Elizabeth responded with a catechism learned from years of slogans. Sacrifices were necessary. The nation had been encircled. The loss was noble. Noble, Anna repeated, not unkindly, as if testing a word to see whether it still fit a world with daylight and coffee and the smell of soap and hair. The debate found its final form. It was not about guilt, which everyone felt, nor about plenty, which no one denied. It was about meaning. What did it mean that kindness came from the other side of the wire? What did it mean that captivity restored what citizenship had stripped away late that night? After the others had fallen into restless sleep, young Greta slipped from her bunk. She moved quietly barefoot on the cold floor toward the bathroom at the end of the barracks. Elizabeth woke to the sound of breaking glass. Sharp. Final. She found Greta on the bathroom floor, surrounded by shards of mirror. Blood pooling from cuts on her wrists. Not deep enough to be fatal, but deep enough to mean something. Greta was crying, hysterical words tumbling out in Italian and German mixed together. I do not deserve to look human. My brother starved while I eat chocolate. I am a traitor. I am alive and he is dead. Elizabeth pressed towels against the wounds, shouting for help. Dorothy arrived within seconds, medical bag already in hand. She knelt beside Greta, her movements calm, practice deficient. You are not a traitor, Dorothy said firmly as she bandaged the cuts. You are a survivor. Greta looked up at her young face contorted with anguish. What is the difference? Dorothy had no answer. Because maybe there was not one. Maybe survival and betrayal felt the same when the world burned around you. They moved Greta to the infirmary, sedated her, kept watch through the night. In the morning, the mirrors were quietly collected from all the barracks. For safety, they said. But the damage was done. They had seen themselves as human. They could not unsee it. Anna sat with Greta the next day while Dorothy changed bandages. The young Italian girl stared at the ceiling. Empty. Do you think God forgives us? Greta asked in broken German. For what? Anna replied. For surviving. Anna had no answer. She took Greta's uninjured hand and held it. Two women who had sworn oaths to different flags, now bound by the same guilt. The same impossible weight of being alive. Week 11 arrived with November rain. The camp settled into routine. Work assignments, meals, medical checks, letters from home that arrived like small bombs detonating grief and controlled explosions. Anna was assigned to clean the administrative offices one evening. Mopping floors, emptying trash, invisible work done by invisible people. She was wiping down the hallway when she heard Captain Morrison's voice from his office. The door was slightly ajar. He was on the telephone, his tone bureaucratic, matter of fact. Yes, sir. Full Geneva compliance. Weekly medical reports show average weight gain of 0.8 kilograms per prisoner. Psychological assessments indicate decreased hostility toward Allied personnel. Recommendation, continue. Current protocol. Anna froze, mop in hand. Morrison continued. Purpose, demonstrate American values exceed enemy propaganda claims. Secondary benefit, intelligence gathering through trust building. Over. Anna set the mop down carefully. Very carefully, because her hands were shaking too hard to hold it steady. So it was calculated. It was strategic. The kindness had purpose. She sat on the floor back against the wall, processing. Did that make it less real? If mercy has a purpose, is it still mercy? If kindness achieves a goal, is it still kind? She thought about the hot shower, the chocolate, the clean sheets, Dorothy's empathetic eyes. Were those things fake because they were part of a system, or were they real despite being part of a system? And then the most terrifying thought of all. What if America's real power is not that they are good? What if their real power is that they can afford to be good? That they have built a system so strong, so rich, so organized, that mercy becomes just another product on the assembly line. That thought, that understanding would change Anna Weber forever. She finished mopping in silence, returned the bucket to storage, said nothing to anyone. But that night in her journal, she wrote in pencil so faint it would fade by spring. They did not defeat us with explosions. They defeated us with delivery schedules. December arrived cold and bright. The Americans decorated for Christmas. Paper chains in the dining hall. A small pine tree in the corner. They mixed the colors, Allied and Axis, red, white, blue alongside Italian green, white, red, and German black, red, gold. As if nations could be woven together like ribbon. December 25th, Christmas Day. The prisoners were invited, not ordered to a special meal. When the dining hall doors opened, the sight stopped them cold. Turkey, real turkey, roasted, golden steam rising from carved slices, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce the color of garnets, stuffing, green beans, rolls with butter. And for dessert, pumpkin pie topped with fresh cream. It was a feast. The kind of feast none of these women had seen since before the war. Since peacetime. Since the world made sense. A chaplain stood and said blessings in English, German, and Italian. For those who have and those who have not. For those who mourn and those who hope. For peace on earth, goodwill toward all. The words felt like mockery and prayer all at once. They sat. They filled their plates. The body demands survival even when the mind cannot justify it. Forks lifted, mouths chewed. Tears began. One by one, forks were set down. Maria stood abruptly. Her chair scraped loud against the floor. Basta, she cried. Enough. My mother has typhus and eats nothing. We sit here with turkey. We are traitors. Room erupted. Not in violence, in grief. Elizabeth stood. My son asked for bread. Just bread. And I send him nothing. Another woman, voice breaking. We eat while our people starve. How is this right? The sobs filled the hall. Some women threw down their forks. Others clutched their plates, torn between hunger and shame. The Americans stood back, uncertain, not knowing whether to intervene. Captain Morrison rose. He raised his hand for silence. They did not sit. Kept crying. He tried again, his voice firm but not harsh. You are not traitors. You are prisoners of war. You did not choose captivity. We feed you because our laws demand it, because our values require it. He paused, letting the words settle. You want to help your families, then survive. Survive and go home and rebuild. Dead martyrs do not rebuild nations. Living women do. The logic was cold, but it was sound. Slowly, so slowly they sat. Anna first, then Maria, then all of them. They ate through tears, tasted turkey that felt like both salvation and sin, swallowed food that nourished the body but wounded the soul. After the meal, Dorothy approached Anna with a small package wrapped in brown paper. For your mother, she said softly, when you go home. Anna unwrapped it carefully. Inside were tins of cocoa powder, sugar coffee, Red Cross parcels stamped with official seals. Anna held the package, unable to speak. It was the first gift she had accepted without guilt. The first acknowledgement that maybe survival was not betrayal. Thank you, Anna whispered in broken English. Dorothy squeezed her hand. You are going to be okay. All of you. I promise. It was a promise Dorothy had no authority to make. But Anna believed her anyway. That night, as the camp settled into post-Christmas quiet, Private Henry Tanaka walked his perimeter rounds. The December cold bit the nurse's uniform, but he did not mind. The cold was honest. It did not pretend to be anything other than what it was. He thought about the women in the barracks, their tears at dinner, their guilt, their confusion. He understood. Henry Tanaka was born in California, American citizen. His parents ran a grocery store in San Francisco. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor was bombed. 2 months later, Executive Order 9066 forced 120,000 Japanese Americans into internment camps. Henry's family lost everything. The store, their house, their dignity. They spent 3 years at Manzanar. American citizens imprisoned without trial, without charges, just for having Japanese ancestry. Barbed wire, guard towers, tar paper barracks, the same architecture of control that now housed enemy prisoners. Except the enemy prisoners at Fort Devens were treated better than Henry's parents had been. The irony was not lost on him. In 1943, the U.S. government started recruiting Japanese American soldiers. Prove your loyalty, they said. Fight for the country that imprisoned you. Henry enlisted, not because he forgave America, because he wanted to prove that he was better than the country that doubted him. So in 1945, when he stood in the Fort Devens processing room translating for German POWs who were being treated with dignity and care, the contradictions were almost unbearable. He had written to his father in November. The letter was careful, measured, trying to make sense of the impossible. Pop, you will not believe this. The German prisoners here eat better than we did at Manzanar. They have real beds, hot showers, medical care, everything we were denied. And I am helping them. I am the one making sure they are comfortable. I do not know if I am angry about that or proud. Because maybe treating enemies well is what makes us American, even when America did not treat us well. His father had not replied. Perhaps there was nothing to say. Perhaps silence was the only honest response to injustice dressed as justice. Henry completed his rounds and returned to the guardhouse. Inside, other soldiers were playing cards, smoking cigarettes, listening to the radio. Glenn Miller. Benny Goodman. The sound of a nation trying to remember what peace felt like. Henry sat in the corner writing another letter he would probably never send, trying to explain the unexplainable. How do you tell someone that mercy can be a weapon, that kindness can break what cruelty cannot, that the most devastating defeat is not death, but the realization that your enemy was right all along? In the barracks, Anna lay awake. The Christmas turkey sat heavy in her stomach, not from overeating, but from meaning. Each bite had been a small betrayal. Each swallow an admission that she was choosing survival over solidarity. She turned over, pulled the thin blanket to her chin. Around her, other women breathed in the rhythm of restless sleep. Some cried softly. Others prayed in whispered German and Italian, the languages of the defeated. Anna thought about her mother in Bremen, standing in bread lines that began before dawn, sleeping in a half-collapsed building with a roof patched by tin, burning furniture for warmth because coal was gone. And here Anna lay in a heated barracks on a real mattress with a full stomach. The guilt was physical. It pressed against her chest like a weight, made breathing difficult. She reached under her pillow and pulled out the small journal Dorothy had given her, a kindness Anna had not asked for but needed desperately. She opened to a blank page and wrote by the dim corridor light, "I am 49 kilograms now. I have gained 7 kilograms in 10 weeks. My skin has color. My hair is clean. I look almost like I did before the war." She paused, pencil hovering over paper. "And I hate myself for it." She closed the journal, slid it back under the pillow, stared at the ceiling until the winter dawn turned the barracks gray. Morning came with the usual bell, 6:30, gentle, punctual, the sound of a system that functioned without cruelty because it did not need cruelty to maintain order. The women rose, dressed, assembled for breakfast. The routine was familiar now, almost comfortable, and that comfort was the most dangerous thing of all, because comfort meant acceptance, and acceptance meant surrender, not to the Americans, but to the truth, that their own nation had failed them, that the enemy had succeeded where the fatherland could not. Anna sat at breakfast looking at her oatmeal, brown sugar, milk, warmth, abundance. Across the table, Maria stared at her plate with empty eyes. Elizabeth picked at her food, mechanical, distant. They were all ghosts now. Alive but not living, fed but not nourished, safe but not free. Dorothy passed through the dining hall, checking on the women. She paused at Anna's table, concerned. "Are you all right?" she asked. Anna looked up, met Dorothy's eyes, saw genuine worry there, and that made everything worse. "I do not know how to be all right anymore," Anna said quietly in halting English. Dorothy sat down across from her, uninvited but welcome. She folded her hands on the table, choosing her words carefully. "You are carrying weight that is not yours to carry," she said. "You did not start this war. You did not choose to be captured. You are not responsible for what is happening in Germany." Anna shook her head. "But I am German. Their suffering is my suffering." Dorothy leaned forward. "Then suffer by surviving. Suffer by going home. Suffer by rebuilding. That is the only suffering that matters now." The words were hard, but they were true. Anna nodded slowly. She picked up her spoon, took a bite of oatmeal. It tasted like compromise, like surrender, like the first small step toward accepting that the world had changed and she had to change with it. That afternoon, Anna returned to the infirmary for her shift. The work was simple: organizing supplies, recording inventory, assisting with minor treatments. It kept her hands busy and her mind quiet. Dorothy was filing medical reports when Anna entered. They worked in companionable silence for a while. Two women who should have been enemies, now colleagues, perhaps even friends. "Dorothy," Anna said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When the war ended, were you happy?" Dorothy stopped writing, set down her pen, considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I was relieved," she said, "but not happy, because Tom was still dead, and all the other brothers and sons and husbands were still dead. Winning did not bring them back." Anna nodded. "In Germany, we are told we lost because we were betrayed, because the homeland was weak, because we did not sacrifice enough." Dorothy met her eyes. "Do you believe that?" Anna was quiet for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "I think we lost because we were wrong, and America won because they were strong enough to be right. It was the first time Anna had said it out loud. The first time she had admitted that the Reich's vision was not noble sacrifice but catastrophic error. That Hitler's promises were not prophecy but delusion. And saying it felt like shedding a skin. Painful, necessary, inevitable. Dorothy reached across the desk and took Anna's hand. "I am proud of you," she said simply. Anna felt tears sting her eyes. She squeezed Dorothy's hand. Two women, two nations. One hard-won understanding that transcended borders and uniforms and flags. Outside, the December wind rattled the windows. Inside, in a small infirmary in Massachusetts, the war finally ended. Not with surrender documents or treaties, but with two women holding hands across a desk and admitting that maybe, just maybe, the enemy was human after all. And if the enemy was human, then perhaps healing was possible. Perhaps forgiveness was possible. Perhaps a future was possible. But that future would have to wait. For now, there was only the present, only the work, only the slow, painful process of learning to live with what they had done, what had been done to them, and who they were becoming in the aftermath. Anna returned to her bunk that night, carrying a new weight. Not guilt this time, but responsibility. The responsibility of survival, of bearing witness, of going home someday and telling the truth about what she had learned in this place. She sat on her bunk and looked at the chocolate bar she still had not eaten. The Hershey wrapper was crinkled now, the foil less shiny, but it was still there. Still proof that such things existed, that abundance was real, that mercy was possible. She unwrapped it slowly, broke off one small square, put it on her tongue and let it melt. It tasted like surrender, like acceptance, like the end of one life and the beginning of another. She wrapped the rest carefully and placed it in her small trunk. For later, she told herself, for when I need to remember that the world can be kind. Around her, the barracks settled into night, women breathing, some crying softly, others praying, all of them alive, all of them changed. And in that small space between captivity and freedom, between enemy and human, Anna Weber closed her eyes and allowed herself to hope. Not for victory, not for vindication, but for the simple, radical possibility that maybe she deserved to survive after all. March 1946, the repatriation ships left Boston Harbor under gray skies that promised rain. Anna Weber stood on deck, watching America fade into Atlantic fog. She was healthy now, 58 kilograms, 16 kilos gained in 6 months. Her face had color, her eyes were clear. She wore a warm coat donated by the Red Cross, and in her duffel bag she carried coffee, cocoa, sugar, and soap. Gifts for a mother she had not seen in 2 years. The other women lined the rail beside her. 47 prisoners who had arrived as enemies and were leaving as something else. Not friends of America, not quite, but changed. Fundamentally, irreversibly changed. Maria Russo stood to Anna's left, silent. The 19-year-old who had cried into her oatmeal that first morning was 20 now. Still young, but aged in ways that had nothing to do with years. "What do we tell them?" Maria asked quietly in Italian. Anna did not turn from the shrinking coastline. The truth, that the enemy fed us while our people starved, that we survived. The ship rolled gently in the swells. Behind them, Fort Devens disappeared into mist. Ahead, Europe waited with its rubble and its questions and its hunger that would not end simply because the war had. The crossing took 12 days. Anna barely slept, because she knew what waited in Bremen. She had received 3 more letters from her mother, each one thinner than the last, each one carrying news of neighbors who had died, buildings that had collapsed, rations that had been cut again. The contrast would be immediate, brutal, undeniable. When the ship docked at Bremerhaven, the women assembled on deck for final processing. American soldiers checked papers, verified identities, issued discharge documents. They were polite, efficient. They handed each woman a small package of food for the journey home. Bread, cheese, tinned meat, one final act of mercy before releasing them back to starvation. Anna descended the gangway on unsteady legs. 6 months on solid ground had made her forget the motion of ships. Or perhaps it was fear that made her legs weak. Fear of what she would see. What she would become once she stepped back into the ruins of the Reich. The port city was a skeleton. 80% destroyed, buildings stood like broken teeth against a gray sky. Civilians moved through the streets with hollow eyes and gray-skinned faces that had forgotten what abundance looked like. And there, waiting at the processing center, was her mother. Anna almost did not recognize her. The war had aged her mother 15 years and 4. Thin, bent, gray hair where chestnut used to be. Wearing a coat that hung loose on a body that had lost too much weight, they stared at each other across the crowded room. Mother and daughter, survivor and starving. The space between them felt like an accusation. Anna's mother crossed the distance slowly, looked at Anna's face, her healthy, full, clean face, touched her daughter's cheek with a trembling hand, then slapped her. The sound cracked through the room. Several people turned. Anna stood very still, accepting the blow. Deserving it. Du hast gegessen während wir verhungerten, her mother said. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. You ate while we starved. Anna said nothing. There was nothing to say. It was true. Then her mother's face crumpled. She pulled Anna close, sobbing into her shoulder. But you are alive. My daughter is alive. They held each other in the middle of that processing center. Two women trying to bridge a gap that felt unbridgeable. Between captivity and freedom. Between abundance and starvation. Between the daughter who had survived and the mother who had not been allowed to. The walk through Bremen was a descent into hell. Anna's childhood street was indeed almost a field now. Rubble had been cleared into neat piles, creating pathways through destruction. But the buildings were gone. The church was gone. The school was a half-collapsed shell. Her own apartment building stood like a broken promise, one wall missing, entirely exposing rooms to the weather, like a dollhouse torn open. Neighbors stared as Anna passed. They saw her healthy face, her warm coat, her duffel bag of supplies. They whispered, Amerikaner Freund, American friend, collaborator, traitor. Anna walked with her head up. Let them whisper. She knew what she carried in that bag. Coffee that might keep her father alive through winter. Cocoa that might give her mother strength. Soap that might restore some small dignity. She had survived. She would not apologize for it. Her mother led her to a building 3 streets over. They lived on the 2nd floor now in 2 rooms that had been an accountant's office before the war. The windows were covered with cardboard. The heating did not work. Water had to be carried from a pump 2 blocks away. Her father sat in a chair by the cold stove. He looked up when Anna entered, and his eyes filled with tears. He did not speak. His cough her mother had written had worsened. Now Anna understood. It was tuberculosis. Advanced, untreated, likely fatal. Anna knelt beside his chair, took his hand. It was all bone and papery skin. I brought medicine, she said, and food. You are going to get better. Her father smiled. It was a sad smile, the smile of a man who knows he is dying but loves his daughter too much to say so. That night, Anna made coffee, real coffee. The smell filled the tiny apartment, and neighbors gathered at the door drawn by a scent most had not encountered in years. Anna's mother invited them in, shared the coffee in small cups, watched as grown men and women cried over the taste of something they thought they would never experience again. This is what the Americans gave you, one neighbor asked, voice sharp with resentment. Yes, Anna said simply. And you took it? Yes. The neighbor spat on the floor and left. Others followed, but a few stayed, drank their coffee in silence, asked no questions. Perhaps they understood. Perhaps they too were tired of judging survival. Anna stayed in Bremen for 3 months, nursed her father as best she could with limited medicine, helped her mother navigate the ration system, stood in bread lines that began before dawn and often ended with nothing. And she made a decision. She would not stay. She could not. Because staying meant accepting that this was all that remained, that survival meant slow starvation in the ruins of a failed state. There was another option. The American occupation forces were hiring nurses, translators, administrators, people who could bridge the gap between the occupiers and the occupied. The pay was in American dollars and came with access to the PX, the post exchange where American goods were sold. Coffee, chocolate, soap, medicine. Her mother begged her not to. Do you want the neighbors to be right? Do you want them to call you collaborator? Anna looked at her father wasting away in his chair. Looked at her mother, gray and exhausted. looked at the cardboard covering the windows and the empty stove and the future that held nothing but more hunger. "I want to survive," Anna said, "and I want you to survive. If that makes me a collaborator, then I am a collaborator." She applied for a position at the American Military Hospital in Hamburg. Her nursing credentials were solid. Her English learned during 6 months at Fort Devens was functional. She was hired within a week. The neighbors stopped speaking to her entirely after that. Hamburg, 1947. The American Military Hospital was a different world. Clean, organized, stocked with supplies that seemed inexhaustible. Anna worked in the surgical ward assisting American doctors translating for German patients who came through the occupation medical system. She saw the machinery up close now. The same systems that had fed her at Fort Devens deployed at national scale. Supply chains that never broke. Protocols that were followed because they worked, not because they were enforced by fear. And she learned something that completed her understanding of American power. It was not that Americans were better people, it was that they had built better systems. Systems that could function even when individual people failed. Systems that scaled mercy the same way they scaled production. The German way had been to demand sacrifice from everyone and deliver abundance to no one. The American way was to create abundance first, then distribute it according to rules that applied to everyone, even enemies. One system had lost, the other had won. It was that simple and that complex. 1950, spring came to Hamburg with unexpected warmth. Cherry trees bloomed in the parks that were being rebuilt. The city was still scarred, but life was returning, slowly, stubbornly. Anna was at the nursing station when she heard a familiar voice speaking English in the corridor. She looked up. Dorothy Sullivan walked through the door, older now, married judging by the ring on her finger, but unmistakably Dorothy. The same sad eyes, the same careful kindness. They stared at each other across 5 years in an ocean of change. "Anna," Dorothy said, uncertain, hoping. "Dorothy," Anna replied. They embraced. Former enemy, current friend. 5 years of transformation compressed into a single moment of recognition. Dorothy had married Dr. William Hayes, the chief of surgery. They had been transferred to Hamburg to help establish the occupation medical system. She would be working at the same hospital, in the same ward, with Anna. They sat in the hospital cafeteria drinking terrible German ersatz coffee and laughing about how far it was from Fort Devens' real coffee. "Do you remember that night?" Anna asked. When I asked why, Dorothy nodded. "Every day." "I understand now," Anna said carefully. "You were not trying to break us. You were trying to show us what we had lost, what we gave up when we followed Hitler. You showed us that civilization, real civilization, takes care of people, even enemies." Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. "I was angry when they sent me to Devens. I wanted to hurt someone for Tom. But you, all of you, you taught me something too. That the war was not between good and evil. It was between systems. One that could feed people, one that could not." They sat in silence, two women who had learned the same lesson from opposite sides of history. The years passed. Anna worked, saved money, sent what she could to her parents in Bremen. Her father died in 1952, tuberculosis finally claiming what the war had started. Her mother followed in 1950, malnutrition, the death certificate said. But Anna knew it was grief. She was alone now. No family, no homeland that wanted her. Just work and the strange half-life of someone caught between two worlds. 1963, Anna opened a small clinic in Bremen. The city had rebuilt enough that there were neighborhoods again, not just rubble fields. She rented 2 rooms on the ground floor of a new building and hung a sign. Anna Weber, registered nurse. General practice. The clinic served the working-class neighborhood where she had grown up. Many were still struggling 18 years after the war's end. She charged what people could pay. Sometimes that was money. Sometimes bread. Sometimes nothing. It did not matter. The work mattered. Behind her desk in a simple wooden frame, she hung a piece of brown paper, yellowed with age, fragile, precious. The Hershey wrapper from her first breakfast at Fort Devens. Patients asked about it. Some understood, some did not. Some older Germans called her Amerikanerfreund and left finding other doctors. But most stayed, because good medical care was rare and Anna was very good. When people asked about the wrapper, she always gave the same answer. It is a reminder that mercy can be organized, That kindness is not just emotion, it is engineering. The Americans did not defeat us with bombs. They defeated us by proving their system worked better than ours. Some patients nodded, others frowned, but the wrapper stayed on the wall, a small, persistent testimony to a truth Anna would not let die. 1965, Maria visited from Ohio. She had married an American engineer after the occupation ended, David Chen, Chinese-American, who had fought in the Pacific. They had two daughters who spoke English and Italian, but struggled with German. They sat in Anna's small apartment drinking real coffee now because Germany had recovered enough that coffee was available again. Not abundant, but available. "Do you ever regret surviving?" Maria asked. Anna considered the question with the care it deserved. "Every day," she said, "and never." Maria nodded. Her daughters had asked about the camp, about the war. Maria had told them the first thing they did was make us clean. That is how they conquered us, with decency. The daughters had not understood. How could they? They had never been hungry, never been cold, never watched their world collapse and been forced to rebuild it one choice at a time. "Some things cannot be explained," Anna said. "Only felt, and maybe that is mercy too." They finished their coffee. Maria and her family returned to Ohio. Anna returned to her clinic, and the years continued their steady accumulation. Elizabeth Hoffman taught high school in Hamburg from 1955 to 1980, German literature and history. She never remarried after her husband's death, never saw her son again who had been taken by his paternal grandparents and raised to forget his mother who had served the Reich. But she taught, because teaching was her way of paying the debt she felt she owed to the future. Above her blackboard, she wrote the same sentence every morning in chalk. "Gnade ist keine Schwäche, sie ist Disziplin." Mercy is not weakness, it is discipline. When students asked about the war, she did not talk about battles. She talked about Fort Devens, about the shower, about the oatmeal, about learning that the enemy was more civilized than the government she had served. She taught because she had to. Each student was her apology to the world. She could not undo the past, but she could prevent the future from repeating it. 1987, the Bremen Historical Society organized an oral history project, Women's Experience of World War II. They gathered survivors, recorded interviews, preserved memories before the generation that had lived through hell faded entirely. Anna Weber was 68, Maria Chen was 61, Elizabeth Hoffman was 76. 8 other Fort Devens survivors came. They sat in a circle of chairs beneath bright studio lights, hands trembling more from time than emotion. The interviewer was a young German historian, born after the war, too young to remember hunger, too young to understand guilt that lasted decades. "What do you remember most?" she asked. No one mentioned fear. No one spoke of surrender. They spoke of the shower, the chocolate, the small gestures of kindness that had shattered their understanding of who the enemy was. Anna spoke of the first shower. "Warmth when I expected Gem, that moment when I realized they were not going to kill us. They were going to care for us." Maria spoke of chocolate, real chocolate. "I held it and cried for an hour. Not because I was happy, because I was confused. Why waste chocolate on enemies?" Elizabeth spoke of the American cook. He did not speak, just gave a small nod. "That gesture said, you are human. I see you, you matter." One woman, Frida, spoke of guilt. "The day I realized I was gaining weight and my mother was starving. That was the worst day of captivity. Not the arrival, not the fear, the guilt." The room was silent after that, heavy with memories that refused to lighten even after 42 years. The interviewer shifted in her chair, asked the question everyone was thinking. "Do you forgive them?" The Americans, Anna smiled, faint, sad, full of accumulated wisdom. Forgiveness is for equals, for people on the same level." "We learned something harder. We learned that they were right." The interviewer looked confused. "Right about what?" "About everything," Anna said. "That feeding people is stronger than starving them, that systems of care outlast systems of cruelty, that mercy when scaled becomes unstoppable." Elizabeth added her voice. "They defeated us with abundance, rebuilt us with mercy. Perhaps that is what victory really means. Not to destroy your enemy, but to make her see herself in your mirror, to show her what she lost by choosing the wrong side." Maria spoke last. "My daughters asked Mama, were the Americans the good guys? I said no. There are no good guys in war, but there are systems that work and systems that do not. We serve the one that did not. The interview ended. The women went home to their separate lives, but the recording remained. Voices preserved on magnetic tape. Testimony that would outlive memory. Anna Weber died in 1999, 80 years old. Pneumonia quick and merciful. She died in her small apartment in Bremen, surrounded by her niece, former patients, and Dorothy Sullivan Hayes, who had flown from Boston when she heard Anna was ill. Dorothy held Anna's hand as she faded. "You were right," Dorothy whispered. "About all of it. You understood what we were doing better than we did." Anna smiled, too weak to speak, but the smile said enough. After Anna died, her niece sorted through her belongings, found 3 items in the drawer of her bedside table. 3 objects Anna had kept for 54 years. A journal, pages brittle with age, but every word still legible. 54 years of reflection on how mercy defeated ideology. A chocolate wrapper, faded, fragile, preserved behind glass. The first gift from the enemy that had become a teacher. And a mirror, small, tarnished edges, but glass still clear. On the back of the mirror, Anna had etched words with a pen, faint but readable under the right light. Amerika gewann nicht durch Kugeln, sondern durch Produktion, Fülle und Gnade. America won not by bullets, but by production, abundance, and mercy. The niece donated all 3 items to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. They arrived in a carefully packed box, accompanied by a letter explaining their significance. Today they sit in a display case. Exhibit titled POW Experiences, American Camps, 1945 to 1946. The placard reads, "These objects belong to Anna Weber, German POW at Fort Devens, Massachusetts." The mirror issued September 1945, kept until death, 1999. The chocolate Hershey bar wrapper, first meal in captivity. The journal, 54 years of reflection on how mercy defeated ideology. Weber became a nurse in American occupation hospitals, later opened a clinic in Bremen, serving 40,000 patients. Her legacy proving that systems of care outlast systems of war. Visitors stop, read the placard, look at the objects. A 17-year-old American student asks her teacher, "Why is a mirror important?" The teacher answers carefully, "Because she saw herself as human again." And that changed everything. The mirror sits in its case, reflecting the faces of visitors, people from every nation, every background, every belief. All of them looking at a piece of tarnished glass and seeing the same truth Anna Weber learned in 1945. That mercy is not weakness. That abundance defeats scarcity. That systems built on care outlast systems built on cruelty. That America's real victory was not military. It was moral. It was proving that a nation could be strong enough to be kind, rich enough to be generous, secure enough to treat even enemies with dignity. Anna Weber spent 54 years teaching that lesson, one patient at a time, one conversation at a time, one small act of defiance against the ideology that had nearly destroyed her world. She never became famous, never wrote a book, never gave speeches, but she lived the truth she had learned, and in living it, she proved it. That the true measure of a nation is not how it treats its friends. It is how it treats its enemies. It is whether its systems can scale mercy the same way they scale production. It is whether its values can survive contact with the people who oppose them. In 1945, America chose to feed its enemies, to clothe them, to care for them. Not because it was easy or popular or even understood by many who did it, but because the system demanded it, because the values required it, because engineering mercy into the foundation of a society makes that society stronger than any weapon ever could. Anna learned that in a cold Massachusetts room in September 1945, learned it through hot water and chocolate and clean sheets in a mirror that showed her she was still human. And she spent the rest of her life proving that the lesson was worth learning, that survival was not betrayal, that accepting help from former enemies was not weakness, that rebuilding required acknowledging which system had been right. The mirror in the museum catches afternoon light, throws reflections across the room. Visitors see their own faces looking back, see themselves in a piece of history that refuses to stay in the past. Because the question Anna asked in that Fort Devens infirmary in 1945 is still being asked today. Why are you doing this? Why treat enemies with kindness? Why waste resources on people who opposed you? And the answer, Dorothy gave the answer that defeated fascism more surely than any bomb still echoes. Because it is right, not because it is easy, not because it guarantees gratitude, not because it will be understood or appreciated or even remembered, but because building systems that care for people, even enemies, is what separates civilization from barbarism. Because mercy, when engineered into the foundation of a society, becomes its greatest strength. Because in the end, America did not win World War II with superior firepower. It won with superior systems, with logistics that could deliver abundance, with values that could survive implementation at scale, with a radical belief that human dignity was not conditional on nationality or allegiance or victory. Anna Weber understood that, carried that understanding through 54 years of life in the ruins and the rebuilding, never forgot the lesson learned in captivity, never stopped teaching it to anyone who would listen. Her mirror sits in Washington. Her chocolate wrapper yellows further with each passing year. Her journal pages grow more fragile, but the truth they represent remains solid. That mercy can be manufactured, that kindness can be systematized, that the greatest weapon is not the one that destroys, but the one that builds, and that sometimes the most devastating victory is simply proving to your enemy that you were right all along, not through force, not through conquest, but through the simple radical act of treating them like human beings worthy of care. That is what Anna Weber learned. That is what she taught. And that is what her mirror still reflects for anyone willing to look closely enough to see.